My mom billed me for rent at 32 and said I had to be a free nanny for her new kids, or I'm out. I'm Aiden, 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, I realized my life was a cheap, poorly directed reality show, and I was losing. I always thought our family was just me, Mom, and the eternal fountain of her righteous, sometimes suffocating, love. My father left when I was 10. He didn't just leave. He fled, leaving behind only debts, vague memories of the smell of whiskey, and the guilt that Mom expertly instilled in me all these years. She said I was her only support, her most important man, and I believed her. I tried. I've worked tirelessly since I was 18 so she could get back on her feet. I finished college, got a stable job as an accountant. Not fancy, but the stability she always dreamed of. We lived in our house, which my father left her, another battleground she won. And I, the fool, never even thought about moving out. Why would I? We were family. I helped pay the taxes, bought groceries, and fixed the leaky faucets. Everything started to crumble when Gary entered her life. He appeared as suddenly as a summer storm, loud, rough, with a booming laugh that initially irritated me. Gary was a widower with 2 children, 7-year-old Emma and 4-year-old Jacob. Mom, always so reserved and strict, blossomed next to him. She started smiling, cooking new recipes, and talking about our future. I was genuinely happy for her. I felt like I could finally relax a little, shed the role of the main man. First, they just dated. Then Gary started staying over. For months later, they got married. Quiet, very quick wedding. I came home from work, and they were sitting at the table, holding hands, saying, "Aiden, we're one family now." I smiled, congratulated them. I thought things would stay the same, just with a little more noise in the house. But things did not stay the same. Gary's kids, Emma and Jacob, moved in a week after the wedding. They're good kids, not spoiled, but very demanding of attention. And that's when it started. I, the 32-year-old accountant, suddenly became the extra person in my own home. My mom, who used to fuss over me, now only had eyes for them. She constantly said, "Aiden, watch Emma. I need to go to the store." Or, "Jacob woke up. Go entertain him while Gary and I discuss finances." My room, where I always felt safe, started looking like a transit point. Kids' toys, forgotten things, and one time Jacob even drew on my work shirt with a marker. I just sighed. I tried to talk to Mom about it, to ask her to set boundaries. That was 2 days ago. I waited for her in the living room when she got back from work. "Mom, I need to talk. I'm glad you're happy, but I can't be a nanny for your new kids. I need to work. I have my own schedule." I started gently. She looked at me as if I had just confessed to a crime. It was that look, full of disappointment, that she used to give me as a child when I broke her favorite vase. "A nanny? Aiden, this is my family. And these are your new brother and sister," she said in an icy tone. "And if you say that, it means you don't understand what responsibility is. You're a 32-year-old man living under my roof, and you pay me nothing." I was stunned. I had been paying my whole life. For taxes, for electricity, for food. "Mom, I pay for everything." I protested. "No, Aiden." She stepped closer, her voice getting softer, which made it even scarier. "You paid for conveniences. For the food you eat, for the electricity you use. But you didn't pay for the housing. This house is mine. I earned it after your father ran away, and I raised you myself. And now that I have a new family, I have to think about them. And if you want to live here, you have to earn that right. Either you take on the care of the children, that's your family duty, for free, or you find somewhere else to live." I stood there, deafened, looking at my mother. She wasn't kidding. "But where will I go?" I asked, feeling the panic choke me. Rent in my city was simply unaffordable for a man who had given almost his entire salary to shared expenses for the past 10 years. I had no savings. Mom smiled, and that smile was the cruelest thing I had ever seen. "You can always go to your father in Austin. I'm sure he'd be happy to see you," she said. I knew what that meant. My father was still drinking. His apartment was a dump. It was worse than the streets. It was a threat. In that moment, I understood. I wasn't a son, but an asset who had suddenly become a burden. And now, to stay in this house, I had to become free help. And this, damn it, is only the beginning. I agreed. I had no choice. But I promised myself that this month would change everything. And I would find a way out, even if I had to burn every bridge. The first week felt like I was living inside a clock that was always running too fast. My life, which used to be neatly partitioned by spreadsheets and deadlines, was now dictated by the whims of a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. I agreed to Mom's ultimatum because I had to. The thought of Austin, of my father's permanent smell of stale beer and desperation, made the floor plan of my childhood home suddenly seem like a luxury resort. But agreeing didn't make the resentment any less corrosive. Felt like swallowing ground glass every morning. My day started at 6:30 a.m. now, not 8 a.m. I had to get Emma, the older one, ready for school. She was surprisingly articulate but also knew exactly how to push buttons. She saw me as an obstacle, a strange adult who wasn't her dad, suddenly hovering over her breakfast. James, the 4-year-old, was clingier. He'd trail me around the house, constantly asking me to build things with his blocks, or read the same dog-eared book about a blue elephant. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was an accountant, used to dealing with complex financial statements, and now my primary skill was making sure Jacob didn't eat crayons. Mom and Gary? They were enjoying their new life. They would leave for work at 8:15 a.m., usually after a lingering kiss and a cheerful thanks. Aiden, we owe you one. That phrase, we owe you one, was the biggest insult. They didn't owe me anything. They were extorting me. They got home around 6 p.m., tired, but happy. They'd ask about the kids, barely glancing at me. I was the wallpaper now, the essential, yet unnoticed, backdrop to their domestic bliss. The hardest part was trying to keep up with my actual job. I work from home 3 days a week, and those were pure torture. I tried to sneak in a client call while the kids were watching cartoons, but inevitably, James would scream, or Emma would demand help with a complicated math problem she was perfectly capable of solving herself. My boss, Mr. Henderson, noticed the shift. He started mentioning my distracted tone and slow response times. I couldn't tell him I was stuck in domestic servitude because my mother decided my freedom was worth less than a babysitter's wage. The financial pressure was a constant, low-grade fever. I had calculated exactly what Mom meant when she said I was paying for conveniences. I figured out the average cost of groceries, utilities, and taxes that I had always covered. It was significant, but not enough to cover the actual rent in this neighborhood. I knew she was waiting for me to fail, waiting for me to stumble and give her a reason to deliver the final blow, the eviction notice. I started doing what I had to do. I began stashing cash. It wasn't much. $100 here, $50 there. Every time I cashed my paycheck. It was a secret fund, hidden deep inside a hollowed-out dictionary on my bookshelf. Every bill I added felt like a small act of rebellion, a brick for the wall I was desperately trying to build between myself and my mother's control. This money wasn't for rent. It was for the escape fund. I realized that the house wasn't the goal anymore. Freedom was. One evening, for days into this new regime, Mom walked into the kitchen while I was making dinner for the kids. I was chopping vegetables with a focused, almost angry intensity. "You look stressed, Aiden," she observed, not unkindly, but with a detached curiosity, like looking at an insect under a microscope. "It's a lot, Mom," I said, keeping my voice level, juggling my full-time job and full-time childcare. "I missed a deadline today." She shrugged, leaning against the counter. "That's what family is for, sweetie. Children are a family obligation. And honestly, you should be grateful. You're getting valuable experience. Besides," she lowered her voice slightly, but the smugness was still loud, "you know that rent in the city is astronomical. This arrangement is still saving you a fortune. Think of it as a trade. You help me, I let you stay." The word trade made my stomach turn. She made it sound so reasonable, so fair. But it wasn't a trade. It was a hostage situation. I forced a tight smile. "I'm thinking about it, Mom." every single day. I knew she was pushing me into a corner. What she didn't know was that every minute I spent fetching juice boxes and changing TV channels, I was planning. I was analyzing the situation like a financial audit. Assets. My stable job, my growing secret stash. Liabilities. My mother's emotional blackmail, the 2 children, and the crushing lack of time. I needed a clear path, and I needed it fast. A month. That was the timeline. I felt the tension rising, not just between me and Mom, but inside me. The guilt she had always fed me was being replaced by a cold, sharp anger. This wasn't about the kids. This was about control and money. And the real secret, the one I wasn't sharing with anyone, not even with myself yet, was how much I had truly come to despise the new dynamics of this family. The game was set, and the first few $100 in the hollow dictionary were my opening move. We were halfway through the month. 2 weeks down, 2 weeks left until I either found a way out or cracked completely. The tension in the house was now a physical thing, thick and suffocating, like old, humid air. Mom and Gary seemed oblivious, basking in their manufactured contentment, but every interaction felt like walking across a floor rigged with pressure mines. The conflict escalated sharply on Tuesday. It was one of my crucial work-from-home days. I had a mandatory video conference with a high-profile client at 10 a.m. I had meticulously planned the morning. Wake the kids, feed them breakfast, set up the iPad with a movie, and lock myself in my room, praying for 45 minutes of silence. Everything went wrong at 9:55 a.m. I was logging into the call when Jacob, the 4-year-old, burst into my room. He was crying, holding his blue elephant. Emma, the older one, was right behind him, looking smug. "He took Mr. Snuggles," Jacob wailed, running straight for my desk. "I didn't. He's lying," Emma shouted back. I had 30 seconds before the client joined. "Guys, 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes of quiet. Please. I will deal with the elephant after," I pleaded, scrambling to mute my mic. Jacob, overwhelmed, tripped on the corner of the rug, and in a desperate attempt to grab the desk for balance, he knocked over my coffee mug. The hot, black liquid surged directly over my work laptop. The one I owned, the one containing all my critical files, the one I used to generate the income that kept me, supposedly, grateful for living here. The laptop instantly went dark. A terrifying, dead silence filled the room. The children froze, recognizing, perhaps for the first time, the magnitude of the disaster. My client was calling. My screen was black. I didn't yell. I felt a cold, surgical calm wash over me. I simply got up, pushed the chair back, and told the kids, my voice dangerously low, "Go downstairs, now." When Mom got home that evening, the laptop was still sitting on my desk, looking like a very expensive paperweight. I didn't hide it. I knew this was the confrontation I had been building toward. She walked in around 6:30 p.m., looking tired but cheerful. "How was your day?" "Dinner smells good." "My laptop is ruined, Mom," I stated flatly, pointing at the desk. "Jacob spilled coffee on it this morning. I missed the client meeting and I might lose this account. The repair alone will cost over $1,000. She sighed, a familiar, exasperated sound. She didn't look at the laptop. She looked at me. "Aiden, for God's sake. It was an accident. They're children. What were you doing leaving hot coffee near a 4-year-old? She snapped, instantly shifting the blame. "You're too harsh on them. And why were you working when you're supposed to be watching them? You know the arrangement." "The arrangement is that I have a job that pays the bills, Mom. And that job requires a computer. And I can't watch them and work." I finally raised my voice. "The arrangement is that I'm your free nanny because you won't let me live here otherwise. This isn't a family obligation. This is extortion." That word, extortion, hit her. Her composure shattered. "Don't you dare talk to me like that, Aiden," she hissed, stepping closer. "After everything I've done for you? You ungrateful child. You think I owe you this house? You think you have a right to be here? I've paid taxes and utilities for 10 years. I shot back. "Where are my savings? They went into this house. They went into the comfort you enjoyed. She retaliated, her voice rising to a shout. You didn't have to worry about rent, and now you're complaining about watching two innocent children? You need to earn your right to stay, Aiden. You need to pull your weight. Then I did the one thing I had been preparing for. I pulled out my last pay stub from my jacket pocket and threw it onto the dining table. Fine. Let's talk about earning, I said, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. My salary is X. A full-time nanny in this area costs Y. Let's say I pay you Z for rent. I just calculated it, Mom. The cost of a full-time nanny for Emma and Jacob is more than my salary. You are not just letting me stay for free. You are profiting immensely from my forced labor. You and Gary are saving $30,000 a year because you turned your 32-year-old son into a servant. You didn't need me to earn my right. You needed a free employee. The air went dead silent again. She looked down at the pay stub, then back at me. Her face hardened, losing all trace of motherly pretense. This was the moment of truth. The children are family, Aiden. Your family, she said, her voice low and dangerously firm. And family takes care of its own. If you cannot fulfill your family obligation, if you cannot handle the simple duty of watching your new siblings, then this house is no longer available to you. You know where your father is. If you walk out that door or if you refuse to watch them tomorrow, you are out. It was a cold, calculated confirmation of the threat. The conflict wasn't about the kids or the laptop. It was purely about money and power. I was trapped. But as she delivered the final threat, a small, cold realization crystallized in my mind. If I was going to leave, I needed more than the paltry cash I had stashed. I needed leverage, and I knew exactly where to find it. The night after the laptop exploded and the verbal war erupted was the worst of the month. I didn't sleep. The cold threat of being sent to my father's dismal place in Austin felt suffocating. But Mom's calculation, her blatant admission that this was about her financial gain disguised as family obligation, had cleared my head like a strong dose of reality. The emotional manipulation was over. Now it was just business. Cruel, personal business. I spent the next 2 days walking on eggshells, performing my duties as the free help with a grim, practiced efficiency. I fixed the laptop situation temporarily by borrowing an old, slow machine from a colleague, telling him I was dealing with a temporary domestic emergency. I didn't dare tell him the truth. The humiliation was too deep. Meanwhile, I focused on my new plan, leverage. When Mom said, "This house is mine," she was using the ultimate shield. She had always made a big show of her struggle to keep the place after my father left, framing herself as the solitary victor. But something she said during our fight about earning the house always felt slightly off. I remembered snippets of conversations from years ago, fleeting remarks about an unusual arrangement with the bank after the divorce. I decided to investigate. The house was the root of her power, and if I could understand its true foundation, I might find a flaw. Mom always kept the important documents, insurance papers, the house deed, financial records, in a locked metal box in her walk-in closet. The box itself wasn't what I was after. It was what was around the box. She kept a small, antique wooden chest on the floor next to it, supposedly filled with old photo albums. On Thursday morning, a little past 11 a.m., Mom and Gary were at work, and the kids were occupied with a particularly long animated movie. This was my window. My heart hammered against my ribs with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. I felt like a thief, but the alternative was homelessness or Austin. I slipped into her closet. The metal box was locked as expected. I quietly opened the wooden chest. Albums, old cards, baby pictures. Then, right underneath a stack of Christmas photos, I felt a heavy manila envelope. It wasn't labeled, but it felt official. I pulled it out and sat on the floor, tearing open the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were mortgage documents, closing statements, and something else, a quitclaim deed dated exactly 5 years after the divorce signed by my father. But the papers that grabbed my attention were not the deed. They were a set of detailed payment schedules and a legal addendum from the bank. I quickly scanned the dense legal jargon. my accounting brain clicking into focus despite the panic. The house had been refinanced shortly after the divorce. The addendum stated that while Mom was the primary name on the title, hence her claim that she earned it, a significant lump sum payment had been required to clear the remaining debt and remove my father's name entirely from the liability. And that lump sum payment hadn't come from Mom's salary. I cross-referenced the date of the lump sum payment with my own financial history. 5 years ago, I had received a small but substantial inheritance from my grandmother, my mother's mother, who had explicitly requested the money be kept separate for my future education or down payment on a place of my own. I had dutifully deposited it into a joint savings account, intending to invest it later. The discovery hit me with the force of a physical blow. The lump sum payment, the amount needed to secure the house and truly make it hers, the payment that justified her endless narrative of self-reliance, was exactly the amount of my grandmother's inheritance. Mom didn't earn the house. She stole my inheritance to buy out my father and solidify her control. She hadn't just used the money I contributed to utilities. She had used the money that was supposed to be my independent start in life. She used my future to secure her present. This wasn't just about rent or being a nanny. This was a complete betrayal and financial fraud hidden under the guise of family martyrdom. I carefully put the documents back, leaving everything exactly as I found it. I walked out of that closet a different person. The confusion and hurt were replaced by a cold, searing clarity. I was facing a monumental moral dilemma. Do I confront her with the evidence of her betrayal, risking an immediate, brutal eviction and the destruction of our relationship? Or do I use this information silently, as leverage to buy myself enough time to save for my own place, playing the dutiful servant while secretly planning my escape and revenge? I looked at the old, slow, borrowed laptop. I looked at the schedule of duties she had taped to the fridge. I looked at the 2 innocent kids who were completely unaware they were pawns in her game. The path ahead was clear, but the cost was terrifying. I couldn't see the evidence. I wasn't just her son anymore. I was the victim of a calculated deception. I had the papers and I was going to use them. The evidence of the inheritance theft burned a hole in my mind. It was the absolute, devastating confirmation that my mother's sacrifice and love had been transactional, based on what she could extract from me. The moral dilemma, confrontation versus silent escape, was swiftly resolved. Silent escape was too slow, too meek. She had stolen my future. I wasn't just leaving. I was demanding reparations. I decided to strike on Saturday. Gary was scheduled to work late, and I knew Mom would be home, tired and complacent, expecting me to be tending to the children. I spent Friday consolidating my position. I calculated the exact amount of the inheritance, plus the accumulated interest it would have earned over 5 years, applying a conservative rate. I created a meticulous 2-column ledger. One side listing my grandmother's inheritance, my 10 years of tax and utility payments, and the cost of the destroyed laptop. The other side listing the value of the free nanny service I had provided for 3 weeks. The numbers spoke a devastating truth. She owed me. When Saturday evening arrived, I put Emma and Jacob to bed early. I felt a strange mix of sorrow and relief while tucking them in. They were just kids, innocent bystanders in a financial war they couldn't possibly grasp. My connection to them, however forced, was the only clean thing left in this house. I found Mom in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone. "Mom, can we talk?" "In the dining room," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. She sighed, irritated. "Can't it wait, Aiden? I've had a long day. The kids are finally quiet. Let me have 5 minutes." "No, it can't wait," I insisted, my gaze holding hers. The firmness of my tone made her put the phone down. We sat at the dining table. I placed the manila envelope containing the quitclaim deed and the refinancing addendum in the center, alongside my meticulously calculated ledger. "I know," I said without preamble. "I know about Grandma's money." She frowned, confusion giving way to a sickening flicker of recognition. "What are you talking about? What money?" "The inheritance. 5 years ago. The amount that was used to pay off the mortgage lump sum and remove Dad's name from the deed," I explained, tapping the addendum with my finger. The money that was explicitly meant for me for my start. You took it. You used it to earn this house, and then you used the house to control me. Her denial was immediate and furious. How dare you? You broke into my things. That's stealing. And those papers are complicated. You don't understand financing. Aiden. I understand numbers, Mom. I'm an accountant. I countered, pushing the ledger across the table. Look at the dates. Look at the amounts. They match my inheritance withdrawal down to the last dollar. You didn't save this house through sacrifice. You leveraged my future for your security. And now you're demanding I earn the right to live here as your free nanny. She grabbed the ledger, her hands shaking, her eyes darting between my calculations and the legal papers. Her face cycled through outrage, panic, and finally, a cold, hard resignation. The mask finally dropped. Fine. Yes. She spat out the confession, her voice a strained whisper. Yes, I used it. I was desperate. Your father left me with nothing. I was protecting us. The house was going to be foreclosed. I did it for us. No, Mom, I said, shaking my head. You did it for you. You secured your asset, and then you kept me here as your free labor because I had no down payment left for my own place. You created the situation you now punish me for. And what do you want, Aiden? You want me to give you the house? She sneered, recovering some of her old venom. I want the equivalent of my inheritance back, including interest and the cost of my new laptop, I stated, pointing to the bottom line of the ledger. Or I walk out tonight and I promise you, I will contact a lawyer on Monday morning. I have the papers. The bank might overlook the use of funds, but the violation of trust, the extortion for free labor, that will destroy your carefully constructed life with Gary. It was a bluff. A lawyer would be expensive and a court battle would drag on. But the look on her face told me she believed it. She looked not at me, her son, but at the potential damage to her perfect new life. The thought of Gary finding out, Gary, the reason she kicked me out, was her true Achilles heel. You wouldn't, she breathed, but her eyes were pleading. I already have my bags packed, I said, pointing to a small, empty suitcase by the front door. I need a written promise, an IOU, for the calculated amount, payable within 3 months. And I walk out of here tonight, never to return, and I will keep these papers a secret. She struggled, debated with herself, tears finally blurring her eyes. Not tears of regret for me, but tears of fear for herself. After 5 agonizing minutes of silence, she grabbed a pen. She signed the paper, her signature jerky and angry. I stood up. I took the IOU and my secret cash stash. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't hug her. I didn't even look back at the kids' darkened rooms. I simply walked to the front door, picked up my suitcase, and stepped out into the cold night air. The silence outside was deafening. I had my freedom and the promise of financial restitution, but the cost was the total obliteration of the only family I had ever known. As I walked down the street, I felt an emptiness far greater than the lack of money. I won the battle, but I lost the war for a genuine connection. I realized then that freedom isn't just about having your own key. It's about accepting that some relationships are too fundamentally broken to ever be fixed. My mother loved the idea of me, the devoted son who supported her, but she didn't love me, Aiden. The house was hers, and now, finally, my life was mine. But was it worth trading my family for a ledger entry? I didn't know. I just kept walking.